We're all used to seeing lawyers pull out all the stops to defend their clients, but for the first time in US history, we saw a Florida judge use virtual reality to experience the recreation of a crime scene.
It's pretty crazy to see a judge behind the bench wearing an Oculus Quest 2 headset.
Yeah, I know the video of this judge wearing like VR goggles a couple of weeks ago in court went viral, and he was watching what's called a forensic animation.
And this case is pretty controversial because it involves Florida's stand your ground law. Basically, a venue owner is facing 9 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon for pulling a gun on guests at a wedding on his property, but he says it was self-defense.
And there's released footage of him going around like waving a gun at guests, so it doesn't make him look great.
Right, the video makes it look like he's the aggressor, but they say it's not the full story.
Yeah, so his attorney, Kenneth Padowitz, decided to take an innovative step in showcasing his defendant's side by using virtual reality. So Google studies have shown that VR is uniquely powerful since obviously if you're watching it, you're not just watching it, you're actually living it.
Studies also find that VR animations lead to significantly better recall of evidence, and they elicit an emotional response, which would be a powerful tool of persuasion in the courtroom.
Experts have said that experiences in virtual reality are actually more linked to memory and create feelings of empathy because of how immersive it is. So it is critical that these VR recreations are extremely accurate.
Well, to get these questions and concerns addressed, we spoke with attorney Padowitz. And before we play that, you should know that he told us that the VR animation that was played in this trial was made by a legal expert's opinion based on the depositions of dozens of wedding guests, police reports, and pictures and visits to the venue.
What about this case made you want to use VR animation as evidence?
As a defense attorney, over the last 40 years I've been practicing, making sure that justice is done is very, very important to me. And animation, computer forensic animation, which I pioneered in 1992, and now I've taken it a step further using virtual reality to make sure that the judge or a jury fully understands why my client had to resort to defending himself with a firearm.
And so what does virtual reality let you do that a typical animation doesn't deliver?
This is a self-defense case. My client is charged with 9 counts of aggravated assault with a firearm, where he's facing, if you made him consecutive sentences, life in prison. And so I thought the best way to communicate how my client was surrounded by these drunk individuals at this wedding and how they were screaming threats at him. His wife had just been beaten. His son had been beaten. The party planner had a chair thrown at her and been attacked. And so when he went in to de-escalate this situation after telling his wife to call 911, and I can't think of a better way, a more intense way to show this than to do it through virtual reality.
And this was the first time that VR was used as evidence in a court. Was it hard to get this motion passed and approved?
What this animation is, what this virtual reality is a visualization of my expert's opinion. I used one of the best experts I could find in the United States that recreated the crime scene. So was it difficult? It was. The prosecution, of course, objected, and they made arguments as to why it shouldn't come in. But the judge allowed it into evidence, and I believe it's the first time in the United States.
Could you kind of walk us through one of the videos, one of the animation videos?
So my client is walking down the hallway with his cane, and he stopped at the door, and they're not letting him in his own business. He owns this place. All those people are in his home. And so he has his cane, and he can look down and see his cane. He hands it to his son, his stepson, who's behind him. And now he's let into the facility that he owns. And his goal is to de-escalate. He starts walking towards the DJ, who's the man in the white shirt, all the way in the back there. And he's walking towards him. And as he's walking towards him, he's saying, "Party's over. Everyone go home. Turn off the music." And he's being met with yells and screams and threats. And the DJ is making threats. People are making threats at him. My client's putting his hand up saying, "Go home. Everyone has to leave. This is my business. You have to leave. The party's over. The wedding is over." And he's getting surrounded, and he starts to retreat. He has the gun with him for protection for his staff, for himself, and he's not taking it out. He keeps telling everybody, "You have to leave. You have to leave." And he's retreating. And now he's retreated all the way against the bar. He can't go back any further. There's a very large man in front of him. They're all yelling and screaming at him. He's surrounded. He walked with a cane. He's going to have surgery in 2 weeks on his arm. And the man in front of him at this point, right about now, who's literally inches from his face, right in his personal space. Eventually, at this point, while he's surrounded, the man grabs his arm, and my client then, at that point, thought his life was in jeopardy and pulls out the gun. And by the way, when he pulls out this gun, he doesn't say, I'm going to shoot you, I'm going to kill you. He never says that. The actual video that is after this point shows my client saying, get out, get out, get out.
So what was the process like to get this animation completed?
What we do is my expert, after he's formulated his opinion, my crime scene expert, his team of forensic experts that were former detectives, we probably had 25 meetings over the course of 9 months or a year, in making sure that the animation and the virtual reality was to exacting standards so that it would meet the legal baseline that we needed, which needs to be fair and accurate.
Is there a reason that people don't use it more often? Is it expensive? Does it just take a really long time?
Well, it's definitely expensive. So it is something that I pick and choose based on the resources of my client and the type of criminal case that I'm defending. In this specific case, it was extremely appropriate. It was exactly what I needed. I had a case where there was a video that was taken by one of the intoxicated wedding guests, and it was not a good look for my client. He's walking around, appears to be waving a gun at this wedding, and he looks like, this is a bad situation. I needed to counterbalance that against that actual video.
So critics of this would say, how do the jury, how do the judge know what they're watching is accurate?
So first off, we have to use the base that expert opinions are admissible in court, in federal courts and in every state in the United States. So if an expert can do a diagram, well, then we could have 50,000 diagrams run at high speed, an animation, to create the effect of motion. If we can have an animation admitted, the next step is virtual reality, where a jury or a judge can see as if they're there. And keep this one other aspect in mind. In the law, in almost every state, and definitely in Florida, you can have what's called a jury view. You can actually request through a motion to have the jury brought to a crime scene so they can look around and see the scene for themselves. Well, if you can do that, and you can have an expert give an opinion and draw a diagram, why can't we combine the two in the form of virtual reality and the jury to see and experience the same exact thing?
Do you have any worries about this kind of growing in the courtroom at all? Like if you're on the opposing side and, they're using virtual reality to showcase this?
No, I don't have any worries at all, and let me tell you why. Many times when I'm trying a case, whether it was as a prosecutor or as a defense attorney, that I would use a blow-up or I would use an object or a diagram, and the other side would not. And that's part of practicing law. As a lawyer, you have to decide what strategies you're going to use and how you're going to communicate the evidence in the case to the jury or to the judge.
That was such a cool conversation. Attorney Padowitz made some pretty good points about how, forensic animation in VR is just the natural evolution of pictures and diagrams. If we as a society have advanced technologically, why not use that to upgrade the legal system? But I'm curious to see if they will introduce rules and regulations down the road just because of how powerful and emotional VR is.
Well, recently a Louisiana Circuit Court judge wrote an op-ed about this case and said, we need to establish clear standards and best practices for the creation, validation, and presentation of VR evidence in court. But after talking to the attorney, it sounds like so much is up to the judge's discretion and what they think is fair. In this case, the judge allowed the VR presentation for this hearing, but he hasn't said yet if it would be admissible if this trial goes to a jury.
The case will resume in February, so we'll be following it closely. And Attorney Padowitz said that if his client is found innocent, the case doesn't end there, because they're going to turn around and sue the Davie Police Department and the town of Southwest Ranches for $80 million.
Yeah, he called it the worst police investigation he's ever seen. And beyond claiming self-defense as part of Stand Your Ground, Padowitz also said he believes this case is part of a political vendetta and that local officials are targeting his client because he hosted Republican-affiliated events at the venue.
As we dug into the case more, we found that there was probably just one other case in the world that used VR, and it was in Beijing back in 2018.
Yeah, and that was an intentional homicide trial, and in that case, the witness wore VR and the rest of the court watched a projection of it.
And whatever your opinions on using VR in court cases may be, it's pretty cool to be living through like a legal precedent that'll probably change the field forever.